Thank you. So again, a good evening to all of you. A very warm welcome to our guest speakers today and to all of our visitors. I'm particularly excited about today's event. Kota, we had Bundi earlier this year. So it's nice to have another Rajasthani former princely state, and of course closely connected to the history of Bundi. Kota is a fascinating place, not only because of the architecture, but also particularly of the wall paintings. This is why I'm particularly honored and very, very pleased to have two leading experts on the wall paintings of Kota. Dr. Joachim Bautze from Berlin is joining us this evening. He has written extensively, done extensive research on Kota, and he has a fantastic lecture today for us on the rhinoceros, and which really represents also this focus on both hunting scenes but also animals. And Isabella Nadi will be talking about Krishna kings and this relationship in Kota and the erstwhile royal family. And then we have also the Yuvraj of the erstwhile royal family of Kota. And I'd like to remind the audience of Milo Beach's words about the book that was published by His Highness on the wall paintings. And this is something we very strongly endorse, to have the involvement of the erstwhile royal families and to stress the importance that they play, not only in the upkeep and maintenance of the buildings, but also to make it accessible to scholars and to be personally involved in the display and the revival of this beautiful architecture and cultural history and art history. So I'm very, very pleased to have the Vijraj Singh of the erstwhile royal family of Kota, who will be starting today to talk about the various buildings, also customs, and talk a little bit about the management of these historic buildings and how they're being used, utilized, and shared with the public today. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
Could we just have some assistance, please, from IT to have the Yuvraj spotlighted as the main speaker? And I think you can already start screen sharing.
Okay.
Again, thank you very much for making the time to be here with us and share this beautiful history of Kota in the present.
Well, greetings to everyone who joined us today on this webinar. And it is a pleasure for me to be able to be present with you today on this resilience lecture. And it's a wonderful initiative which has been started by the Center for Historic Houses. And I commend Professor Esther Schmidt and her team for all the efforts in this regard. And it's a particular honor to have Dr. Bautze and Dr. Isabel Nadi also on the program. I will try and give a little flavor regarding the establishment of Kota and the history of Kota as I talk about some of the historic properties that my family are custodians of. The foundation of Kota was laid in 1264 by Prince Jait Singh of Bundi. He defeated the Bhil chieftain Kotia, cut off his head, and on that spot, buried the head and established the foundation of the fort. That was an old custom in those days, that the body is buried where you want to intend to build a building or a citadel. So his name was Kotia, and Kota was named after him, hence the name Kota. Other version of this is that Kot also means a strong fort. So some people say the word Kota came from that. But however it is, at that time it was part of the Bundi state, Bundi kingdom. And this was an appanage, shall we say, or a jagir of the Yuvraj or heir apparent of Bundi. In 1624, Kota got independence from Bundi. Shall we say it was granted as a separate kingdom to Rao Madhushing. Now, Rao Madhushing was the second son of Rao Ratan Singh of Bundi. In 1624, Emperor Jahangir actually gave this independent state and announced it. In 1631, the Emperor Shah Jahan formalized this grant, or shall we say, reiterated it. And since Rao Madhushing was the first ruler of Kota, the museum is called the Rao Madhushing Museum, and hence the name. As you can see, the Kota Garh is built on a sort of a rocky outcrop and has a commanding and magnificent view of the river Chambal as well as of the town around it. In the past, the Kota Garh was a nerve center of administrative, political, as well as cultural activity. But even today, it continues in the same vein. And at the heart of Kota's historical, cultural, and traditional activities, even today, and plays host to a number of events throughout the year. And the erstwhile royal family has tried to keep alive this tradition so that the future generations do not forget them and it remains in their memory and in their vision. Now you have a look, you can see on your screen an image of the city palace, which is a portion of the Kota Garh. It has two main portions, the Zanana portion, which is to the left and to the north, and the Mardana portion, which is on the right. The Mardana portion is on the north and the Janana portion is to the south. Now the Mardana portion, which you can see in your screen, has several public audience halls. It has the living chambers of the Raos and the Maharaos. And every ruler after Rao Madhushing added on to this at some point. So it grew organically outwards and upwards. And we will see some of it as we go through the presentation and talk about various aspects and parts of the Kota Garh. Rao Madhushing Museum lies in this section, and this was established in the 1970s. It's a lot of effort by my father, Maharao Vijraj Singh ji of Kota. And the most valuable and important part of this museum are the miniature paintings. The exhibitions from the collection of the Rao Madhushing Museum Trust and from the collection of Maharao Vijraj Singh have gone to Cambridge, Massachusetts at the Harvard Art Museums, to New York City at the Asiatic Society Galleries, to Zurich, the Rietberg Museum, and to New Delhi at the National Museum. An exhibition was held in the mid-80s, and paintings from these two collections went to these places. The best paintings, however, are the ones which are on the walls in the Garh. The Kota Garh has several rooms in several areas which has paintings all over. There are entire rooms which have paintings on them. There are niches in the wall which have paintings on them. So in fact, art lovers can spend many hours and sometimes maybe days studying them, looking at them and learning from them. The miniatures are of different genres, different types. The most famous Kota paintings, the Kota style of painting is also known as the Kota Kalam. The most famous are the densely detailed hunting scenes. These are vividly painted flora and fauna, vivid in both color and in detail. Wild animals have been painted very gracefully, yet exuding power. There are also very nice devotional paintings. The rulers of Kota are followers of the Vallabh Kul Sampradaya, and the later lecture by Dr. Isabel Nadi will shed a lot of light on that. But I also want to add that one of the largest miniature paintings in the world is on a paper scroll and is in the collection of the Rao Madhushing Museum. It is about 2.5 meters by 4.5 meters, and it is the visit of Maharao Ram Singh to the Delhi fort in 1842. It's one of a kind scroll, one of a kind, large miniature painting, which you will have to come to Kota to see. I don't have a picture of it. The photograph you see in front of you is that of the Raj Mahal. This also has some very nice paintings as well as very intricate mirror work. This used to be, this Raj Mahal as well as the Raj Mahal ka Chowk in front of it used to be the focal point of activity in the times gone by. This is where the darbar was held, the court was gathered, and even entertainment activities happened here. This is the Bara Mahal, which also has some very nice paintings. This was constructed by Maharao Umed Singh I. Maharao Umed Singh was the first ruler of Kota to use the title of Maharao. Earlier, before that, they were all called Rao. This is also the Badal Mahal. It's a frieze on marble, and you can see animals and some hunting going on. Very nicely made. This is an outer section of the Bara Mahal. You can see some visitors to the Gad who look very pleased with themselves. This is a section of the Arjun Mahal. Arjun Mahal also has some very beautiful paintings in it. This was constructed by Rao Arjun Singh. Here is a section of the walls in the Arjun Mahal. You can see hunting scenes for which Kota is famous. This is the Ananda Mahal, which also has paintings which are of excellent condition, good colors, nice artwork. You can see here the Maharao and Maharani of Kota and the royal family offering Diwali Puja to the goddess Lakshmi. This is also in the Anand Mahal. This is a portion of the Chhatar Mahal, which was built by Rao Shatursalji first. Again, some very nice paintings are to be seen in this area. Apart from the paintings, the Rao Madhushing Museum has a wide collection of artifacts, arms and armory, royal regalia, palanquins, black and white old photographs, silver gilt thrones. What you see in front of you is a howdah, gilt work on it, a sword with gold inlay work. This is an old gun, and you can see fine work showing shapes of animals of different types. Coming back to the Raj Mahal, as I mentioned, this was a focal point of activity in the years gone by, and the chalk in front of it, known as the Raj Mahal ka Chowk, you can see visitors to the museum coming in there. As I mentioned earlier, it was used for entertainment in the olden days, and it is even today used for entertainment purposes and for holding cultural activities. Here you see an annual program held by the Rao Madhushing Museum Trust, a classical music evening, which is held on the birthday of Maharaj Vijraj Singh, which falls on the 21st of February. And every year, a classical music expert is called to give his performance, and people from Kota, music lovers and others, gather to enjoy the spectacle, enjoy the performance. Here you see appreciative audience and the performers themselves. 2 years ago, in 2019, we were very fortunate to have Pandit Rajan and Sajan Mishra, who were Padma Bhushan awardees, and it was really an excellent performance. This is another image of the entrance to the Mardana section. You can see the entry gate, which is a Hathiya pole, and a large sort of terraced paved area, which is called the Bada Chabutra. On this Bada Chabutra, on the day of Dashera, Dashera is a very major festival in India, and especially so in Kota. People wait for many months for the commencement of Dashera. And on this day, the Maharaja of Kota has a reception called the Dari Khana, in which eminent citizens of Kota as well as public representatives are invited, and they come and greet each other and wish each other a very happy Dashera. This starts off in the late evening, and as time goes by, it gets darker. as you can see. And finally, in fading light, the Darikhana converts into the Dashera procession. The Dashera procession starts off from here and goes on all the way to the Dashera Maidan. And I will try and show you a few glimpses of that. Before we go on the procession, I'm just going to show you this image, which shows the pagdis worn by the people at the Darikhana. The pagdi is a particular headgear of each area. And the one that you see worn by the people in the image is the Kota pagdi. The Kota erstwhile royal families tried very hard to inculcate a sense of pride in wearing the Kota pagdi. And we are happy to note that over the last 10, 15 years, more and more people are wearing this pagdi for ceremonial occasions. This is another glimpse of the procession. You can see the elephant which has Lord Lakshmi Narayanji. Lord Lakshmi Narayanji goes on the elephant right up to the Dashera Maidan where the effigies of Ravan are installed and his brothers. And all the people go along in this procession. As you can see, most of them are wearing traditional headgear and proper clothes, as is worn on such occasions. Another view of the Savari with Lord Lakshmi Narayanji's elephant and the standards which are held on tall poles around it. And this is the final Dashera Maidan area where I think about 4 to 5 lakh people gather, mostly from Kota, some from around the area, where Ravan is finally burnt. A member of the royal family goes up to Ravan in this procession and fires a symbolic arrow into Ravan, and then the burning of Ravan and his brothers commenced. Now, the Rao Madhushing Museum has remained connected with the community and holds a number of events throughout the year. Another event it holds is the annual blood donation camp. The blood so donated is collected and given to the local hospitals run by the government so that whenever blood is needed, it is available in ample quantity. You can see the arrangement at the donation camp and some brave souls giving up blood so that others might live when the need is there for blood. Another activity of the Rao Madhushing Museum Trust is an annual heritage quiz contest. This quiz is based on the history, the traditions, and the culture of the Hadoti area. And it is an attempt to encourage the children to learn about their surroundings, learn about their area, the history and tradition. And it has been a very successful endeavor. Though, of course, all these events over the last couple of years have come to a halt because of the corona pandemic. But we hope that in the coming years, we are able to recommence all these activities. This is the prize giving ceremony where all the winners are given some prizes by Mahara of Kota. I go on to talk about Mahara Umed Singh II. He was one of the finest rulers and administrators of his era. And he ruled from 1873 to 1940. He was called the builder of modern Kota. He built many of the beautiful buildings that you see in Kota today. The Government College, the Umed Club, the Mahatma Gandhi Bhavan, Maharani Girls' School, and of course, Umed Bhavan Palace. Since he built it, the name Umed Bhavan came to be. This was built in 1905, and the architect was Swinton Jacob. As you can see, it is built out of sandstone, and a particular feature is the very pale colored or almost white colored sandstone, which is actually mined in Kota district itself in the southern area in a place called Khimach. The architecture is of the Indo-Saracenic style, and today it is run as a hotel by the ITC under its brand, the Welcome Heritage. This is the central garden with rooms around it. You can see the clock tower, which the clock still works today. This is a courtyard. This is a style of architecture favored by Swinton Jacob. This is the reception room. This is a popular lounge. And Umaid Bhavan has played host to many banquets and many events. Queen Mary came to Kota in 1911. A banquet was held in her honor. Lord Curzon also came to Kota. There was another banquet in his honor. Weddings of the royal family have been held here. Maharao Bhim Singh II, my grandfather, was the last ruler of Kota, received his ruling powers here. This is a corridor of the palace. This is a room, very large rooms. The billiards room, which has lovely wooden paneling. And this is the Darbar Hall, which is used for conferences and for banquets and other such things. So I move on from Umaid Bhavan to Vijraj Bhavan. This building was made in 1830. It was built by the state of Kota for the British resident who lived here and was stationed in Kota. As you can see, it's a colonial style building. In 1900, the residency moved away from Kota, Bharatpur. So this building came back to the state of Kota and was used as a royal guest house. This is the front of the building with gardens in front. Another view of the building. As I said, it is a colonial style building with flowing arches. And being a royal guest house, had many eminent visitors who stayed here. As I mentioned, Queen Mary of England had come in 1911. So this is a picture of her with Maharao Umaid Singh II at Vijraj Bhavan. She spent Christmas here, complete with the Christmas tree, and young Maharao Bhim Singh II, my grandfather, received Christmas presents there. Lord Curzon also came and stayed here. Many Maharajas and eminent people have come stayed here as the guests of the state. This is the drawing room of Vijraj Bhavan as it was in those days. And as it is now with the help of color photography. So the dining room, you can see on one side a portrait of Maharao Umaid Singh II. And this room has some very nice paintings of buildings in the Kota area. This is a bedroom which has an interesting history. Originally, this room was the billiards room, which was separated from the main building. But however, in 1909, a new wing was made which linked the old building, and this room became a suite of this new wing. As I said earlier, Vijraj Bhavan is located on the river Chambal. And as a result, you have lots of bird life, vast green areas, a lot of greenery. You can see bird life on the river Chambal, a lot of ducks, cormorants, and crocodiles. You can find crocodiles and see crocodiles fairly frequently here. So visitors coming to Vijraj Bhavan are often tempted to do nothing but sit around all day. And in the warm Rajasthan winters, they try to soak in the sun. Vijraj Bhavan is central in town, but yet away from thoroughfares, so that it is very peaceful and one can hear birds chirping all the time. The river Chambal in front of you. This is yet another view of the riverside environment. That is mostly of what I have to say, and I have put on this page social media handles that we have for the Kota Garh, for Umaid Bhavan, as well as Vijraj Bhavan. And finally, I would like to say that the erstwhile royal family members have been connected to the people of Kota ever since the state of Kota merged into the Indian Union. My grandfather, Rao Madhushing Museum II, was the Upraj Pramukh of the new state of Rajasthan when it was formed. My father, Maharaj Vijraj Singhji, has been a 3-time member of parliament, that is 15 years. My grandmother, Maharani Shiv Kumari, who's no more, was a member of the Legislative Assembly for 1 term. I have been a member of parliament for 1 term. And currently, my wife, Kalpana Devi, is serving as a member of the Legislative Assembly. So the family has always tried to be connected with the people of the area and try to do what it can to uplift the standards of living here. That is what I have to say. It's been a pleasure giving you a little bit of what I know about Kota. And I look forward to hearing more about art of Kota from Dr. Bautse and Dr. Isabel Nadi. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fantastic talk. It was really wonderful to see. And I think what we could all see is what a participatory place this museum is and how heritage is really kept alive by the family. It's really wonderful to see. I would just quickly like to use this opportunity to say that the Center for Historic Houses is creating a palace museum network, the first of its kind in India. We are welcoming privately owned palace museums to contact us, to work with us, and we are delighted that the Louvre will be offering online masterclasses for these palace museums and their collections. So if you are interested, please get in touch with us, and we are so happy to include Kota and the museum in this project. I would now like to welcome Dr. Bautse, who is also our advisor in everything concerning Indian art. It is a great pleasure to have him, and really one of the world's leading authorities on wall paintings in Kota. Please, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're audible, but the presentation is not yet visible.
I have it on my screen.
I'm not able to see it.
Little screen. These two words?
Nein, ich sehe noch nicht die Präsentation. Hast du es probiert nochmal mit dem Präsentationsmodus? Wie beim letzten Mal?
Do you see it now?
No, I just see the small kind of images. Vielleicht
Can I help maybe?
Yes, please.
You should stop the sharing screen and you try again.
Yes.
And when you're going to share, you will see there are different windows. Choose your presentation.
Yes, excellent.
You see anything? Because I have it on my screen.
No, you need to stop to the sharing.
Okay.
Ja, jetzt probier nochmal.
When you click to sharing, the green button, then it opens several different windows, and then you choose the one with your presentation.
Du hattest es ja vorher. Mach mal so, wie du es beim letzten Mal gemacht hattest. Das hat gut funktioniert. Jetzt tut sich was. Jetzt bist du auf Desktop. Du musst das richtige Fenster aussuchen mit der Präsentation direkt. Geh nochmal auf Stop, Screen Sharing und versuch nochmal, aber du musst dann auf das richtige Fenster auswählen. Ist die Präsentation offen bei dir am Computer?
War offen.
Ja. Ich guck gerade mal. Ja. Schau, wenn du auf den Share-Screen-Knopf drückst, ja, dann siehst du ja alle möglichen Dokumente. Und dann musst du auf deine Präsentation gleich gehen, mit Doppelklick.
Ist nicht dort.
Was ist jetzt das Problem? Bist du auf Share Screen?
Ja, ich sehe Video, Computerton, Teil des Bildschirms und Inhalt von zweiter Kamera. Das kann es nicht sein.
Ist deine Präsentation geöffnet bereits auf deinem Bildschirm? Weil ich glaube nicht, weil als ich gesehen habe, bei dir war nur das Desktop. Öffne die erstmal ohne Screen Share, dann geh auf Screen Share und da siehst du ja ganz viele Fenster, ne?
Ja, aber ich sehe kein Fenster mehr von meinem Computer.
Was siehst du denn, wenn du auf Screen Share gehst?
Nur Anwendung, Computerton, Video, Teil des Bildschirms.
Ich weiß, was passiert ist. Guck mal, du hast da oben 3 Fenster. Basic, Advanced und Files. Du bist auf Advanced, deswegen. Geh mal auf Basic oder auf Files. Das ist das Problem. Siehst du das da oben in der Mitte? Diese 3 Knöpfe?
Okay, Basis, ja.
Wenn es schief geht, schick uns doch die Präsentation, dann machen wir es für dich, wenn du willst.
Can you see it now?
Nee, jetzt tut sich gerade gar nichts. Was machst du denn? Was versuchst du denn? Jetzt.
Can you see it now?
Ja, das ist es. Wunderbar. Ja, excellent. Right, we can resume now.
Okay, good evening. Sorry for the small technical mysteries. The rhinoceros and the murals and miniatures of Kota. What you see on the screen is the old fortress of Kota. It's one of the oldest photographs that I could find. And the earliest localizable hunting scene involving a rhinoceros is situated at the western end of the southern wall within the Bara Mahal, within the ancient fort and palace of Bundi, Rajasthan. It is part of several hunting scenes and measures 56 centimeters in height. It is situated 2.45 meters above ground and dates from about the first quarter of the 17th century. This is the scene we are going to see now. In an uneven landscape interspersed with rocks but rich in vegetation, a mounted elephant running from right to left suddenly faces a standing female rhinoceros. The elephant has curled up its trunk and its excitement has folded its ears forward, where attention is drawn to the swollen veins of the ears. The speed of the elephant causes the bells, which are attached to ropes, not to hang down, but to be pulled upwards. The mahout sitting in the neck of the animal raises both arms and the ankusha, or elephant goat, in amazement. The hunter on the elephant's back behind the mahout has taken up his bow and is drawing an arrow from his quiver. The rhinoceros has its tail and ears erect and seems to pause in its tracks with its mouth open. The artist leaves it to the viewer's imagination whether the hunter will be able to shoot or whether the rhinoceros will attack the elephant, which is rushing along resolutely. The painter has skillfully heightened the underlying tension between the rhinoceros and the elephant. The boar of a small wild boar family looks up at the edge of a stream, invisible to the elephant. Monkeys playing among the rocks in the background suddenly turn towards the elephant. A mountain goat, 2 gazelles, a deer and a hind, even a tiger watch this encounter, but are only discovered by the viewer after some time among the rocks. Just to show you briefly the tiger which is there. As are the inconspicuous flowers with the red blossoms blooming in a large part of the landscape and the birds of various kinds flying around. A pair of foxes that have just jumped over a stream at the bottom of the picture, separated from the rhinoceros only by another narrow stream, points to the next scene, seen from right to left, as the second fox looks around in the direction of a horse rearing up at some distance behind. Yeah. The dark brownish skin of the rhinoceros shows numerous deep skin folds with a pattern of irregular squares distributed all over the body. One may get the impression that the back of the animal is covered by a kind of saddle. The open mouth shows the teeth of the lower jaw. The horn is shown as outline only and apparently uncolored. It somewhat resembles the dorsal fin of a shark. The identity of the hunter on the elephant is uncertain. So far, only 2 rulers in the sequence of events can be identified with certainty. Rao Ratan of Bundi ruled 1608 to 1639, and the second son, the future ruler of Kota, Madhu Singh, who lived from 1599 and died in 1648. Madhu Singh became the first ruler of Kota, formerly a part of the Hara state of Bundi, in 1631, as we have just heard, by decree of Shah Jahan. The earliest unretouched wall paintings available today within the palace of Kota were created either under the grandson of Madhu Singh, Jagat Singh, 1658 to 1683, or another grandson of the said Madhu Singh, Kishore Singh, who ruled 1684 to 1696, if not by the latter son, Rao Ram Singh, 1696 to 1707. Of these Kota rulers, Jagat Singh can be identified in a mural of the eastern room of the Chhatta Mahal. Portraits of Maharao Bhim Singh, 1707 to 1720, were inserted, respectively added at a later date. Stylistically, the unretouched wall paintings within the Chhatta Mahal of Kota can be dated to the end of the last quarter of the 17th century. So far, the largest known mural showing hunting scenes, including those on a rhinoceros, is situated on the northern wall of the eastern room of the Chhatta Mahal within the old fort of Kota. It measures 2 meters 42 by 4 meters 14. 8 precedes with. Sorry. This view introduces the right-hand part of this wall painting, in which 12 rhinoceroses are marked here by numbers. This does not necessarily mean that the artist intended to show 12 individual rhinos, especially since in India, this animal is known as being a more solitary animal. In one of the earliest Buddhist texts, the Rhinoceros Sutra, the Kagavisana Sutra as part of the Sutta Nipali of the Pali Canon, it is repeated at the end of 40 stanzas, Eko Chari Kagavisana Kapo, wander alone like a rhinoceros. Rather, the artist wanted to depict a continuous plot with some rhinos, an artistic practice known in India since more than 2 millennia. At this point, I want to quote Sri Vijraj Singh of Kota, quote, "In the 17th and 18th centuries, the jungles of Kota were vast, contiguous to the much larger and richer forests of central India, which stretched uninterrupted for hundreds of miles to the forests of Assam. It was common to find lions, wild buffaloes, and at times even rhinos with tigers there. Wild elephants were found within 200 miles of Kota's border. So this scene may not be based on an artist's imagination. It is quite realistic," end of quote. Within our limits of time, it would be, however, unrealistic to describe each scene with a rhino. We'll present only 2. This scene, rhino number 9. The Mahout thrusts his spear into the rhino's head while the elephant pushes the fleeing animal to the ground with his left forefoot. The young animal with a small horn seems to roar in pain. Naturally, such dramatic scenes had to be practiced by the artist with several preliminary drawings, such as this one, which reveals an earlier underdrawing in charcoal, as well as a partly erased drawing in black ink. The red outline reminds us of the word miniature for the final product on paper. The word miniature comes from the Latin word for the color red, minium, and has nothing to do with the size of the painting. Here we present a closely related scene. Sorry, there is one. A closely related scene, which is neither executed on a wall nor on paper, but somehow on cloth. It is only a fragment of a painting laid down on raw silk. This fragment was formerly in the collection of Stuart Cary Welch, a collector and connoisseur of Islamic and Indian paintings, with a preference for paintings from Kota, where over the years he attended several traditional festivities and ceremonies. This photograph shows him in the Bara Hall of the Vijraj Bhavan, which was just introduced by Vijraj Singh, in Kota on the occasion of the then Bhanbaji's engagement Darbar. Cary Welch, who had shown me his collection in Cambridge as well as in his house in the countryside, owned 4 important depictions of a rhino hunt from Kota. We just saw one of them. The rhinoceros marked with number 8 is trying to escape from an elephant that has just put its trunk around the animal's neck. The tusks of the elephant bore into the young rhino's back, as does the spear of the hunter, who is also the pachyderm's Mahout. Cary Welch owned a closely related magnificent tinted drawing. Reproduced on the front cover of an exhibition catalog on Rajput painting in 1960, or in the Time Life magazine 1966, it belongs to the most often discussed and reproduced Kota drawings. In almost all discussions of this colored drawing, the Mahout is identified with Rao Madhushing of Kota, 1696 to 1707, with the date about 1690 for the drawing. It is time to correct this identification. Rao Madhushing's turban never shows a tiny bunch of roses as shown here. The only ruler with this kind of turban ornament, known from very numerous inscribed paintings, is Rao Madhushing of Bundi. Madhushing Hara was born on the 28th of January, 1624. He ascended to the throne of Bundi on the 5th of the dark half of the month Asar in Bikram Sambat, 1715, after his father Chatasal, also known as Chatusal, died fighting for Dara Shikoh in the famous Battle of Samudar on the 29th of May, 1658. Madhushing died in Aurangabad on the 1st of April, 1681. Stylistically, the drawing, it seems, is not contemporary with the regnal years of that ruler. Here we see Madhushing of Bundi spearing a tiger which has started mauling a horseman. The painting is in the Kota collection. A comparison with both the Welsh drawing and the Kota painting shows the great correspondences of both turban ornaments. The hunter is clearly identified on the back of the painting as Rao Madhushing, who should not be confused with Maharao Bhim Singh of Kota, whose name is occasionally spelled very similarly. So, Chavirao Sri Madhushing Ji Ki, and here it's Maharajendra Maharao Sri Bhim Singh Ji Ki Chabi. So, this is the second inscription is on the back of this painting. The dark complexion and different turban ornament is obvious. You see this here. This is Maharao Bhim Singh Ji. Here a portrait of Madhushing, son of Chatasal, under glass in the Bara Mahal of Kota, clearly identified by contemporary inscriptions. Rao Sri Madhushing Ji, son of Chatasal Ji. And here another inspired painting showing Bao Singh riding an elephant in the Madhushing Museum within the Kota Palace. While I am aware of the fact that some of those authors who supported in their writings the wrong identification of Rao Ram Singh of Kota were, respectively, are apparently not able to read the inscriptions on such paintings, it is a mystery to me why these authors did not read the translation of the inscription on the upper red border of the painting printed in Latin letters below. Here you have Rao Bao Singh, and here you have Rao Bao Singh of Bundi. Let us return to Rhino number 8 in the Chhatta Mahal of Kota. Harry Welch once owned a closely related third version of Rhino number 8, an uncolored drawing published also by Vijraj Singh of Kota in 2004. The only difference when compared to Carey's tinted drawing is the absence of the man shooting arrows on the back of the elephant. Not Carey, but in many ways his competitor, the celebrated artist and collector, the late Sir Gordon Howard Elliot Hodgkin, owned a fourth version of the said hunting scene painted on cloth, apparently here. As with the previous examples, the elephant has put its trunk around the neck of the rhino, which had already been hit by several arrows, which could only penetrate at the folds of the skin. Most noteworthy are the ears of the rhino, which look like buffalo horns. A closer inspection here. A closer inspection of this painting reveals many repainted areas. The rhino ears are not original. Besides, the elephant has no forelegs. In fact, version 4 is a detail from a larger hunting scene on cloth, which involves several hunting scenes, including those on water buffaloes. This is a detail which we have seen before. The total size of this painting is impressive. It mentions 1 meter 2 centimeters by 1 meter 91.3 centimeter. The red line covers the scene we have just seen in detail. The arrows in the fold of the rhino skin in this painted fabric fragment from the Carey Welch collection suggests that the rhino scene in the Hodgkin collection was once also part of a large-scale depiction of a rhino hunt on cloth, of which several more fragments survive. Another depiction of a rhino hunt within the Kota fortification had once existed on the east wall of the western painted room on what is known as the Jalaki Haveli. During the reign of Maharao Umit Singh, ruled 1771 to 1819, Rajwana Jalazalim Singh, lived 1730 to 1823, became the de facto ruler of Kota. He was the Diwan or chief minister of Kota who, under the pretext of serving his master, established himself as powerful ruler. During his time as Diwan, Zalim Singh established an immense palace-like structure within the guard of the city that still bears his name, the Jalaki Haveli. One part of the top of this Haveli consists of an open rectangular court with an adjacent veranda followed by a windowless room on its eastern and western side. Here only 4 scenes with a rhinoceros are depicted. The 4th rhinoceros is here. We cannot see it for the moment. The hunter on the richly caparisoned elephant is the young Maharao Umit Singh, easily recognizable by the golden beaming halo which only surrounds his face. The mode of killing the rhinoceros is known from previous paintings and drawings. Perhaps most remarkable is the rhino's horn, the tip of which points forward instead of backwards. Here, normally it's the other way around. This is a rhino we haven't seen before. Here the rhino seems to attack the elephant, which tries to escape, while Maharao Umit Singh now aims an arrow at the animal while running away. In this scene, it is the rhino which tries to run away with an arrow that already sticks in its head. Yeah. In this depiction, the rhinoceros appears to be very limber as it can turn its head backwards. See there. A veritable treasure house of miniature and wall paintings is the Bara Mahal within the palace complex of Kota, which was already introduced by Vijraj Singh. Its western part is a veranda, the lower part of which is decorated with reliefs on either marble or alabaster. One part of this sequence of reliefs shows two rhinos facing each other peacefully while two black bucks seem to be engaged in a fight. The last slide introduces a kaka or drawing of a Ragamalam, a form of art which is only known from South Asia. It was correctly identified by Sri Vijraj Singh in 1985 as Kalinga, the son of Raga Shri. The Sanskrit text, however, says that it's actually not a son, but a daughter who is, as it says, seated on the back of a tame rhinoceros. I have marked this here in yellow. So if you unsolve the sandhis, it's said, Khadga, Ibha, Skanda, Ruda. Let me conclude with a quote from present His Highness Kota. Quote, ours is a story of an age when the art of line and color was held in high regard, and beautiful miniatures and murals were painted in the kingdom that was Kota.
Thank you very much for this fantastic journey into the past and introducing us to the wall art of Kota with the specific expedition to the animal world and hunting scenes and the precious styles and the meticulous research to help identify and date and put these into context, and also of great interest, of course, to zoologists. Thank you so much. We have a few questions. I'd like to wait to the end. And I would like to ask now Isabella Nardi to continue with her presentation on Krishna and the kings of Kota. Very nice to have you, Isabella.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Our new senior research fellow at the Center for Historic Houses and former Mellon Fellow at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and professor also at the University of Portland.
Okay, can you hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you for having me here today, and thank you for being here. I see some friends, so hi. In the past few years, I've been looking at the network of icons and temples of the Vallabha Sampradaya, which is an important devotional sect centering around the image of Krishna in its form of Srinathji. The icon of Srinathji has its main headquarters in Nathdwara near Udaipur, and during my research I found many visual and historical hints that pointed to the direction of Kota, and I started to follow them. In this presentation I will illustrate some of my findings which highlight the very special relationship that Kota had with this Krishna religious community. First, I will consider Kota early encounter with the Sampradaya, and then in the second part, I will concentrate on some specific murals. But first, actually, let me introduce very briefly the Vallabha Sampradaya, which is also known as the Pushti Marg or the Path of Grace. And it was founded by Vallabha or Vallabhacharya in northern India in the 16th century. After receiving support from the Mughal emperors in the land of Braj, around the area of Mathura, the descendants of Vallabha slowly shifted to Rajasthan and also Gujarat, and they received patronage from the local Rajput rulers and the mercantile elites. In the outskirts of Kota, there is a shrine named Charan Chowki, marking the passage of Srinathji in that area. At the end of the 1660s, when the caretakers of Srinathji were looking for patronage, they stopped for a few months in this location. The movement of Srinathji in search for patronage is usually seen within the so-called exodus of icons. That is a movement of Krishna icons and priests from Braj to Rajasthan, as well as other areas of northern India. But this circulation of icons is usually dated to the late 1660s, a period of political instability in the area of Mathura. The case of Kota, however, shows that this movement started much earlier. Another metal icon of Krishna, known as Vittalnathji, made its first appearance in the area of Bundi Kota as early as the 1580s. So these icons really were going around a lot. so this prompts a new reading of the reasons why this movement of icon took place. Perhaps sometimes it was a matter of patronage. Sometimes it was also due to disputes between priests. So this is the old Vittalnathji temple in Kota, walking distance to the palace, which was used in the early 19th century. From these early examples, one can already determine that the Sampradaya was a substantial presence in the region, but it is with Maharao Bhim Singh that this relationship becomes even stronger, with his formal initiation into the community in 1719. As a result, he receives from a Vallabhan priest a metal icon of Krishna by the name of Rajnathji, a name that we have already heard today, which he installs in the city palace. And here is the temple of Rajnathji as I photographed it last year. And for those of you familiar with the palace, after entering the Elephant Gate, you find yourself in this location. On the right, you enter the royal compound, and on the left, you enter the Rajnathji temple, which is still active. But so how does this sectarian devotion manifested in painting? First, let me mention that many paintings on paper, the so-called miniature paintings on this subject have been published. If you're looking for a reference book, this is what I would suggest. Gods, Kings, and Tigers, which is many works from the royal collection that kind of, similar to what we are talking today. And it was published in 1997. There are many other Kota paintings around, in collections around the world. So many beautiful works. But today, I would like to concentrate on the city palace, which has a number of painted apartments whose murals are equally significant, but they're often overlooked. Some very specific visual representations that suggest a connection between the Vallabha Sampradaya and the rulers of Kota can be found in the so-called Bara Mahal. So you see two images, and you have seen already in the previous presentations. It's one of the most prominent painted apartments. This space is part of what, according to my sources, that is Giles Tillotson, the new Mardana wing of the men's quarter, which was built by Maharao Bhim Singh, according to my sources, but some other put it in earlier. And the building comprises 3 stories, a basement, and then there is a Darbar hall, which was closed when I visited, and on top is the Bara Mahal, and that's the interior. So this richly painted and decorated apartment is sometimes called the Maharaj's bedroom. Even though it is difficult to conceive this space as private because of the substantial effort put into its visual program, and also for the specifics of the paintings, I would say. I would argue that this apartment was used as a private audience hall, especially if we consider that on the lower level there was a darbar hall. So there was an extra filter in privacy as you went up one floor. Probably it was like that. The presence of the murals and of a number of paintings under glass would suggest that this space was used by the king to meet with royalty, where he could boast about the history of his lineage, his own pastimes, and his religious affiliation to the Vallabha Sampradaya, which is very specific in this room, as you will see. The vast majority of the paintings in this room are assigned to the time of Ram Singh II. This is confirmed by a number of inscriptions on the walls. He became the ruler of Kota in 1827 after the death of his predecessor Kishore Singh, who was his uncle, as well as a fervent devotee of the Vallabha Sampradaya. Ram Singh clearly privileged courtly representations for himself, such as hunting and festivals, which cover most of the walls of the Bara Mahal, especially the big panels above eye level. Here he is seen enjoying a dance performance after his accession to the throne, as indicated by his halo. I would place this painting around the 1830, when he was in his 20s. To come back to our devotional focus, I would like to concentrate on these three paintings. Unlike many others, these are not dated nor inscribed, but they form a small group executed by the same hands in the niches of the Bara Mahal. So it is appropriate to see them together, even though they're not placed next to each other. It is also important to remind that in the early 1820s, some stylistic changes were introduced in the visual language of Kota, which are due to the presence of painters from Nathdwara, who were allegedly invited to court by Kishore Singh. So these paintings, these three paintings concentrate on both Ram Singh and Kishore Singh, his predecessor. The first image is a depiction of Kishore Singh, who is portrayed as the ultimate Krishna devotee. He is seen entering into the world of Krishna, where he is afforded a glimpse of the divine lovers, who are accompanied by 8 sakhis, or the ladies in waiting, to use an expression of Heidi Powell's, since we find these 8 ladies very much in Kishangarh painting as well from the 1750s. So my question is this work from the end of Kishore Singh's reign, or is it a painting in which Ram Singh pays homage to his deceased uncle? I will come back to this later. The affiliation to the Vallabha community is also noticeable in this depiction, which represents Kishore Singh with the red turban and his father, Umaid Singh, recognizable by his signature moustache. The figure on the left is Dauji II, the main priest of the Srinathji temple of Nathdwara, who died in 1826 before Ram Singh's accession. Dauji was indeed a very well-known and powerful priest of Nathdwara, as indicated by his numerous portraits in different collections. He appears more than once in the Bara Mahal, such as in this other mural. He had a very, very close relationship with Kishore Singh, who lived in Nathdwara for 3 months in 1821. The palace setting in the background here would suggest that Dauji visited Kota before his death in 1826, and in that occasion, Kishore Singh formally introduced him to Ram Singh as the future ruler of the lineage. While it is difficult to prove if this event ever took place, it is clear that the scene was created to legitimize Ram Singh's position as the ruler of Kota. Here is the final image of the group. Ram Singh is the young figure on the right with the red turban, and Kishore Singh stands next to him. The two royal figures are attending a celebration at the most prominent Vallabhan temple in the town of Kota. That is the Mathureshji temple, which is located in the Kota Bazaar. This place of worship was established sometimes in the late 1730s after the icon was transferred to Kota from the neighboring kingdom of Bundi. This adds to the other Vallabhan temples mentioned earlier, so it's kind of a good concentration that we have in Kota. As for the icon, which cannot be photographed, it can be appreciated in its pictorial representations, where it can be recognized by his 4 arms. So it looks a little bit like Srinathji, but it has 4 arms. So that's the way to recognize it. As mentioned earlier, most of the paintings in the Bara Mahal are assigned to the time of Ram Singh. The date of the paintings under consideration, however, is a bit problematic. If we consider the historical events and the personal situation of the rulers, it becomes difficult to decide if they were executed at the end of Kishore Singh's reign or at the beginning of Ram Singh's reign. Both are a possibility, in my view. So to be on the safe side, that's the date I'm giving, 1826 to 1829. It's of course a speculation. In the final years of his life, Kishore Singh experienced the loss of his son, his brother, and his spiritual guide, Dauji. These would be good reasons for embracing religion, for solace and comfort, but also for promoting a royal successor that was not his son, that is, Ram Singh, who was about 18 at that time, an age that would match also the representation with the facial features in the painting. At the same time, it is possible that these are posthumous depictions, which are very common in India, in which Ram Singh paid his tribute to his uncle and promoted himself as the legitimate ruler of Kota and a follower of the Vallabha Sampradaya in the footsteps of his predecessors. Interestingly, he abandoned this devotional trend soon after. To conclude, I hope I have demonstrated the close relationship between the Vallabha Sampradaya and the Kota rulers. For those of you familiar with Rajput painting, I'm sure you have thought of some parallels with other courts, which do exist. However, I still believe that Kota offers a quite unique religious scenario in the way in which the rulers stick to this specific sectarian denomination over the years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. I'd love to have a time machine now to really solve this problem and know when they were done. It's extremely thought-provoking, and I'd love to ask some of the art historians and curators there what they think. Absolutely fascinating. I'd like to open the floor now to questions. There are a number, and I'll just go to this one here. Can you shed some lights on the paints that were used for the Rhino paintings? Now, this is for Professor Bautze.
Am I audible?
Yes.
The paints which were used for the wall paintings were more or less the same as used for paintings on paper. The only difference is that the preparatory drawing had to be executed on wet plaster, so that the red underline was soaked literally into the wall. The paint which was then added to the wall is a sort of fresco secco, that means a kind of dry paint. It was applied on dried plaster. It was only the preliminary drawing which was applied to wet plaster. So the ingredients are practically identical with those used for miniature paintings.
In this context, there is a question from Subhashish Ghosh. Is there any restoration process to save the paintings? And if yes, who is involved? This is for you, Raj.
There has been preservation attempts in the past, and preservation has been done. But currently, there's no restoration going on, though it is something that is likely to commence at some point. We would like to do some restoration.
I would like to add that we are in touch with the Courtauld Institute, and they would like to resume some of their conservation work in India. So I'd be very happy to put you in touch with the director of conservation there. Yes. Yeah. Hold on, some more questions. A lot of people on social media, because we are very active there, were very surprised about the rhinoceros. They didn't know that they existed there. So yes, that is really fascinating. Seema Shah, and I think there were two questions from you. Is there a community of Kota artists or an atelier of sorts in the present day? Very important.
Yes, there are artists who are painting in the old style still. There are a couple of families which do that, and one family, in fact, has a small school where they teach other people in the style. So yes, the answer is yes.
So if we would like to contact them, for instance, how could we find out about these painters?
You can actually possibly phone them and talk to them. We'll find out the numbers for you.
Thank you. All right, I'll share it. Yeah, so Seema Shah, if you would like to know more about this, please get in touch with the center, and I'll share this information with you. Before I forget, I wanted to announce our next resilience lecture in September. We'll be traveling to Hyderabad and be featuring Rao Mahal Palace and the Nizam household. And as I mentioned, I'm inviting particularly the palace museums in India, also forts, to contact us. And we'll be featuring particularly those historic houses in the resilience lecture series now, which have museums attached to them. Yes, thank you. Lots of very positive comments about our speakers. Thank you very much. It's lovely to hear this. Yes, unless there is no other question, we'll just go through this. Just looking through the questions. Seema, I think you had another question. Yes, Seema Shah again. Would these drawings, and this is for Joachim Bautze, would these drawings be the works of the Kota master known for his realistic elephant renderings?
It depends at which drawing she thought about, because we saw different drawings.
She was probably referring to the larger painting with the many different types of rhinos.
now the painting, which was formerly with Kerry Welsh, the tinted drawing, the master of the elephants is an invention, because elephants were very minutely drawn over more than a century. So it's very difficult to say the period of the master of elephants. So this is this was done by people where I don't know if they have seen all elephant drawings in existence. There is a very early elephant series, so to say, that in the 1720s, and there's an artist which we know by name from the Lucknow Museum, his name is Niju, that there was a series of paintings showing different Bundi and Kota rulers with their elephants. And all these elephants are practically by the same hand, although the identifications from Rao Ratan and Rao Jagat Singh, etc., are all different. But much of this material has never been published, including quite a few drawings in the former collection of Stuart Carey Welsh. So this cannot be answered like that. I can't give you an exact figure for the time period.
One more general question concerning the genre of wall paintings, apart from huntings and gods. What other kind of different works can we find in Kota? What are kind of characteristic of the Kota school is one of the questions.
Whom do you ask?
Oh, yes. I mean,
Dr. Bautse is probably more qualified. Maybe Dr. Bautse or Dr. Nad.
Well, considering the very many murals in Kota, almost anything was painted. Yeah. Not only hunting scenes, but I mean, I remember in one palace you have a railway. You have a railway entering the railway station of Agra on the walls. You have a giraffe. I mean, that's an animal which is not at home in India. You have a painting of a giraffe. Yes. You have paintings of the most major darbars, including the Ajmer Darbar and many, the Agra Darbar of Lord Lytton, if I remember. Well, all this was painted, so there were not only hunting scenes, but darbars, any amount of religious scenes, paintings from Indian literature, I mean, isolated paintings of Ragamalam, Rasik Priya by Keshav Das, etc., etc. So in this respect, Kota is probably unrivaled by any other palace complex that I know in India. The sheer amount of paintings in existence is almost unimaginable, unless you have lots of time to see all of them.
A question from Naomi, one of our regular attendees. Lovely to see you. Fascinating. What was the owner's grandfather's impression of Lord Curzon? Frankly, please.
I don't know. I'll have to ask and find out. I have to ask and find out. I will get back to you on that.
Right. Interesting. You know, one of the topics that continues to fascinate me, it's a lifelong interest really, is the topic of cultural encounters. And of course, in Kota, you have so many different influences from Persia, Mughal art, but also other foreign influences. And maybe this is a question to, to both Isabella and Joachim. So to what extent do you see these kind of cultural encounters, or kind of, can you talk about cosmopolitanism in this context, or how would you actually evaluate this kind of influence in the art?
Joachim?
Okay. Now it's, you have European gentlemen already in miniature paintings done for Maharao Umet Singh. I mean, I'm talking about Umet Singh first, of course. So you have French people, published by Deloche, several people who actually interviewed and met Maharao Umet Singh first. In the volume Kota, Its Gods, Kings and Tigers, this is mentioned. I mean, there's a short version of the history of Kota for art historians. And if you look under Umet Singh, you will see that there were French people who already quote Umet Singh Ji first in their writings. And these people also appear in the miniature paintings with their strange European wigs from the 18th century. Another European influence only starts during the reign of Chatushal, the successor of Maharao Ram Singh, in the 19th century, that you have a certain foreshortening. There is, for instance, the Agra Darbar of Lord Lytton, which was attended by Chatushalji, and you see that his horse carriage is shown in a sort of foreshortened way, which is the first time that this type of technique was introduced into Kota painting, and it's almost certainly, copied from European similar pictures.
Interesting.
Isabel?
Oh, I was thinking of the Bara Mahal also has many foreigners that you also published about. So I was thinking of your of your contributions. You found someone in the murals and also in the paintings. I don't recall his name, but many of them. I mean, a lot of encounters there. But my period is kind of later. I mean, the Mughals were long gone, I think, by the time of Ram Singh, but absorbed. I mean, their style was kind of absorbed already at that time. So.
Thank you very much. So with these words, I'd like to conclude. And if you would like to watch it again or certain sections, please look at our YouTube channel. Otherwise, the Resilience Lecture Series, the lectures take place every first and third Saturday of the month. So thank you very much again, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.